And he was talking with the three of the men that was on my trick. LeDuc was one of them, Huey Montgomery was the other, and Olson, I think, was the other. But he was talking to them. He had a parachute on, and he was talking to those 3 or 4 fellas there, and he said, if you ever had to use this parachute, he said, and you pull the ripcord and the parachute does not open, he said, don't hesitate to pull the bottom emergency ripcord. And LeDuc told me, he said, I thank that guy, he said, because he saved my life. And what happened, I mean, at LeDuc, they were standing in the center of the aircraft talking, Huey Montgomery and Olson and LeDuc, and all of a sudden the plane just dropped. It was like in an elevator, and it started to vibrate, shake. And then it came up a little bit, and then the whole side of the plane went out. And these, like I say, the 3 fellas there, plus 2 other fellas, they all had their chutes on. Well, this colonel, he somehow got out of the aircraft, and he was up in the cockpit through this whole flight. And his parachute opened also. And he found the railroad tracks, and he walked, and he was found, I think, 3 or 4 days later, but he was frozen. He froze to death out there.
That was a tough course. Tough course.
Let me add one thing to your story. I was there at the 3rd RSM when this happened, and some of the people thought that I was on that flight because when the name of the passengers came in, the Duke, and my name is Dukes, why, they thought it was me. And 2 or 3 people walked up and said, I thought you were on that flight.
Well, I remember there was a young man from the 3rd Radio, but he was a photographer. He was going up to take some photographs and come back, but he perished on there, and I can't remember his name. He was only like a 1-2 striper, nice young guy, and the names are on there, but I don't know which one it is. But he, I know when the general had to, colonel at the time, I remember he had to go through his personal possessions and send them back, I mean, as well as the other situations you had to handle back in those days when that happened.
One of the saddest stories about that flight was a friend of mine by the name of Nelson Potter. Nelson Potter was an airman 2nd class, and Nelson loved classical music, and he smoked a pipe, and we had a couple of guys from New York who didn't particularly like, you know, the way this guy was. He kept to himself, you know, he didn't want to bother anybody, you know, but these guys, they would ride him to death 24 hours a day, you know, oh, Potter, you're queer, you're this, you're that, and finally, Nelson said, when he had the chance to get up to St. Lawrence Island, shorten his tour, he says, I'm going. And he was on that plane. And after the plane crashed, the guys in the 2nd floor, who, you know, we were all together on the 2nd floor of that building, we just, I couldn't tell you what we kept saying to these New York guys, 2 New York guys. I hate to say New York, you know, New York's not a bad place. That's not what I mean. But, you know, they were just the bottom of the scum, you know, unfortunately.
Well, let's see here. I've got some more things that have been prompted by discussions. Put some of this stuff down. after that dreadful accident in 1954 in February, there was a shoot down of a Navy aircraft up in the Bering Straits, up in the Arctic Ocean, and it landed by accident more than anything else on St. Lawrence Island and skidded on the beach there, and there were wounded guys aboard. The fighter pilot, the Soviet fighter pilots had shot into the airplane. Fortunately, it didn't explode, and when they landed, it didn't explode. So they got out of it. But and by the way, this is a picture of the aircraft. You can't see it very well, but this is on St. Lawrence Island, up at the western end of the island. Let's see, that was the town of
Gamble.
Gamble. Gamble, that's right. It was Gamble. You bet.
Was
That's
it
what we did.
P2V?
Yeah.
P2V.
Huh?
P2V.
That's what?
P2V was a Navy designated airplane.
Yeah, I'll buy that one.
Yeah, 19.
The Navy aircraft, they have so damn many different.
Now, that's what that one was. I remember.
Yeah. But anyway, I got a call from the headquarters down in Kelly, and I think it was Gordon Wild. He called me. Remember Gordon Wild?
Yes.
He called me and said, John, he said, you indicate that you had intercepted the exchange of messages, voice messages, between the fighter pilots and the ground controllers. And I said, yeah, that's right. He said, well, it turns out that the ambassador to the Soviet Union is visiting here in Washington, and he has received a report of the shoot down, and he would like to listen to the tape that says "Ataka, Ataka, Ataka." And I said, well, okay, we'll try to do that. Now, we recorded things in fairly primitive ways, as you know, compared to what we could do today. But that recording was made on St. Lawrence Island. And by the way, the reason the ambassador wanted to listen to it, he was very fluent in Cyrillic and Russian, and his name was Avril Harriman. And so getting that off the island and then back down to Kelly, because Kelly said they wanted to see it first. You know how headquarters are.
Yeah.
And so we got it to them. And it was appreciated by, I'm told it was appreciated by the ambassador, and we were able to do that. Now, let's see, there was something else here I wonder. Oh, you reminded me, or Joe did, reminded me of a situation. He was talking about the thing that I want to talk about. I'll finish up here so you can get some chow. In 1955, it was in the spring of 1955, we started getting some strange things. They were digits, a lot of digits that we didn't quite understand. We couldn't put them here. Remember that. It was a little hairy, and we knew, we thought that some of these may have been board numbers off of Soviet long-range aircraft, and we said, ho, ho, you know, we're up here to keep an eye on the Soviets. And, gee, I guess we ought to try to figure this one out. And we ran together quite a bit on that one, I'll tell you. A lot of nail biting, all that stuff. So, gee, what is this, you know? Gee, man. Well, we tried our equipment. What was it? The equipment, the number on the equipment in which you took a look at the incoming signal, and you could sort of identify
He
how.
had radio fingerprinting kind of a position. They wouldn't call that at the time.
No, it was anyway.
Basically a signal.
We ran this through the system, ran the signal through our system, and gee, it didn't give us the answer. I notified the Navy, and I notified where was it, Millard, forgotten his name. He was the Army colonel that had the Army signal intelligence effort in the Alaskan area. I notified him, said I'd appreciate it if you would have your guys take a look at the signal and try to get a bearing on it. So he said he would do that. And I told the Navy the same thing, get a bearing on this. Well, they reported back that, gee whiz, the signal was just all over the place. It was just hard to get a bearing on it. They just had trouble with it. And I called the chief of Gen 3, and that was, what was his name at the time? And you're not going to remember that, but I'll tell you, I've written it down here. The bottom line with regard to Gen 3, they looked at the stuff we had. That's the big NSA. Of course, they were a young NSA at that time. And they said, we don't know what it is either. Well, I guess it was about the following day. Meantime, all SIGINT stations, I guess, all had a procedure that they were supposed to adhere to, that if certain things happened and it looked like there was trouble ahead, that you should declare a SIGINT alert. And we bit our nails and we stood around, and who was it that there was an officer, he was a captain in the ops area. I can't pull up his name. He was a smart aleck and a good one. But anyway, he said, we ought to go ahead and declare the alert. I said, all right, let's do it. So we sent out the typical round-robin message that said, we've got this signal. It appears to be coming from the southern maritime area, and there's some things in it that make us think that maybe this involves the Soviet long-range units over there. We don't know. So we shot that around. The following day, I guess it was Willard Mize, I think that was his name, Colonel Willard Mize, the Army guy, called me a little sheepishly. He said, John, he said, I'm really embarrassed to tell you this, but the signals that you were intercepting were a new encryption system that we're using on our bearing returns. And I think I said something that time, because I had sent this thing all around Robin Hood's bar. SAC had flushed its refueling aircraft to their forward operating bases. And I said, oh, gee. So I thought, there go the sink in the whole damn thing. It was sort of, It was rough. We've been had a little bit, and
They forward deployed bombers and everything.
yeah,
In fact, even at
it was something. So anyway,
29s,
I
P-50s.
said to myself, I guess we gotta do something. I'm not exactly sure, but about that time, I got a message from the boss, General, what's his name? General, here. It was General, good man, very soft, oh, Jesus. Anyway, he was the chief of the Air Force Security Service. It'll come to me gradually.
Bassett.
And the message said,
Bassett.
Hunt Bassett. He said in his message that, John, I'll be up there next week to visit with you. And I'm bringing with me the intelligence officer for the North American, no, I guess it was it was Brigadier General Woody Burgess. You all remember Woody Burgess. The North American Air Defense Command. And he was the intelligence officer. He's going to bring him. And I thought, oh boy. So I'm sweating this out next week to come up and have the boss come in. He landed at Elmendorf, and he's a little dour, actually, man, and that didn't help the situation any. But he came hopping down, put out his hand, said, John, it's good to see you. At the top of the steps was Woody Burgess, a 1-star from the Air Defense Command. He said, John, you did great. It was wonderful. We haven't had an exercise like that for a long time. It was just what we needed. And I thought, oh boy. Well, we pointed at that. No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, I want to put one piece in that before that.
Yeah.
You can imagine what kind of day I was having before that, because he had said to me, you may encounter your first occasion of being court-martialed. I've always remembered that.
I guess that's something you'd remember. Yeah, well, anyway, there were other things like, I guess we have just a few minutes. I got out of the Air Command and Staff